It's hard to have the words for this one, except you can't make this up, folks. Marty, up north, we're doing this again. One more week has passed, and well, you did you win a bet or what was it? You made a prediction.
No, yeah, no, I'm feeling good about this one, Clyde. So yeah, remember back in August, I made a bold prediction. Actually, in an interview when you and I were talking in August, I said something like, summer was over and it felt like the calm before the storm, and September was upon us.
Why don't we get
And
into
then
it? I got the clip here.
sure, play that clip. Play that clip.
Was
Yeah, you know how it feels like to me right now. It kind of I think for most Canadians, it feels like the summer is over, and I kind of feel like we've had sort of maybe a nice summer, other than the forest fires. But and I sort of have a feeling that things are going to get ugly in September, October, November. That on the political side, we got a whole bunch of nasty stories coming down, some nasty events, and I don't know. It feels like a calm before the storm. It doesn't even. It feels like the forest fires were just a minor storm compared to some of the shit show that's about to hit us in September, October, November. That's just my thought.
You nailed it. You absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, and actually, if you don't mind, Clyde, just to further nail it, can you go to my Twitter feed and just show the graph that's pinned, which is it's the that one there. So that's the 338 polling, and you can see how suddenly the Conservatives, Pierre is pulling ahead of Trudeau, and that tipping point where I put an arrow is about let's call it September 1st.
Wow.
And what I said back at that time or just before this is that there's a calm before the storm, and the writing was on the wall that all the bad policies of the Liberals were going to come to bear, that interest rates were not going to get better, inflation's not going to get better, immigration, housing, nothing's going to get better. And I could list it on and on and on. And I think honestly, and at the time I thought that Trudeau's days were numbered, that he'd maybe last until October. I'm still thinking his days are numbered, but that's a different topic. But I feel, not that I feel good because we all lose, but the Trudeau policies, and this is another week. This is another very typical week that shows that the Trudeau policies are hurting Canadians. And this week was dominated by the Liberals announcing that they were suspending the carbon tax for 3 years and what amounts to Atlantic Canada, right? They're suspending it on fuel, on home oil used as a fuel for heating homes. Well, the only people that use home oil nowadays is Newfoundland and the Maritimes, PI, New Brunswick. But that announcement was the Liberals finally admitting that the carbon tax was hurting people.
And not only that they didn't care much about the environment. Environment wasn't number one for them because, well, if you look at it, people who use electricity in say you got rid of all the natural gas in Alberta and people went to electrical, it would be coming from coal plants in the United States. If they use natural gas instead of this oil, well, it would be cleaner. It would be absolutely cleaner. They could even truck in propane, use that, retrofit their systems, and at less cost than a heat pump, and it would be cheaper, and it would be also cleaner. It'd be a lot cleaner for the environment.
Absolutely. So when we go back and people ask Trudeau, why did you lift the carbon tax? He said, well, it's to. He didn't say that it was because it was hurting Eastern Canadians. He said it was because we needed to give them the opportunity to save more money to be able to transition more quickly to these heat pumps. Well, then everybody said, whoa. Didn't you tell us that the carbon tax was revenue neutral, that whatever we paid, we got back in checks every quarter? He's like, oh yeah, but you get the checks every quarter, and now if I do this, then you'll have money in your pocket every month. It's like, well,
like what you've been saying.
Then you might as well lift the carbon tax and not have it in the first place.
That's right.
But then it gets even more ridiculous after that. I mean, on the surface, everybody's like, okay, it's valid. He's doing something to help Atlantic Canada. He's not helping Western Canada, Saskatchewan and Alberta. He's helping Atlantic Canada. But then you got people like Andy Lee and others that start digging into it. He's going to give people money, and he's going to make people buy a heat pump. Okay, well, then somebody digs in and goes, oh, check it out. Guess who owns, the heat pump company? And guess who? Oh, and what else? A heat pump he wants everybody to go to electricity in Newfoundland and in the Maritimes. So then people reached out to me and said, hey, Marty, look into Muskrat Falls. And now you start looking into Muskrat Falls, which is like this government sponsored power dam that's been in construction for a decade, that is like billions of dollars over budget, that's going to provide unreliable power to a handful of people on the Avalon Peninsula. And you go, oh my God. So again, they're backtracking.
I've got the tweet right here. So this is a fun fact from Andy Lee. One of the largest heat pump manufacturers eligible for federal rebates is Trane Technologies. In 2021, Trane teamed up with Brookfield Renewables division to deliver green HVAC solutions. The chair of Brookfield is, of course, Justin Trudeau's friend, Mark Carney.
Mark Carney.
Isn't he one of the guys that they're looking at to be a next Liberal leader? Wasn't he a Carney?
Oh no, he's been thrown around. He's been tossed around as definitely as a candidate, and I think Mark basically came to the mic this week and almost officially threw his hat back into the ring for
more liberal corruption, eh?
Yeah. No. So that's well, and let's keep unraveling this tax announcement. So
yeah,
Trudeau's backtracking on it. So now let's fast forward. Within a day, he's creating more division in the country. So within a day.
Well, before we get to that, I want to talk about heat pumps a little bit. Heat pumps are this concept that it's supposed to be this really, neutral way of doing things. It's an AC. It's a reverse AC. This is the way it works. It uses a condenser. We're not talking about geothermal heat pumps here.
Nope.
We're talking about just a plain Jane AC that's turned around so that the AC works the other way. It pulls the heat
out. It's a refrigerator working backwards. It's exactly that. I mean, thermodynamically speaking, don't want to bore your viewers too much, but outside air has heat in it. As long as it's above absolute zero, it has heat. But man, the heat in air in Alberta or BC, even BC, doesn't matter where. If it's minus 20 outside, that air, like the idea is you mechanically take that minus 20 air and you extract whatever little heat is in there. So in effect, you're cooling the outside air further and transferring the heat into the inside space. Man, it's inefficient. Below, like the heat pump below, I'm going to say below minus 10 is,
But it's burning up energy in the process of doing that. And I've looked
needs electricity.
I looked into it, and they supplement using heated coils in these systems so that you might as well just have baseboard heating at that point with a fan.
Your fridge is a heat pump. The inside of the fridge gets colder and the outside of the fridge gets warmer, and so it's a box, and it's the same exact principle. Absolutely.
Now if you take,
and it won't work.
Well, if you take the same energy put into, say, natural gas, you light a flame, and the flame heats an element, and you blow air through that element, and you heat your home.
And again, it's something you and I have talked about. I wish the government would tell us what the problem is. So is the problem that you want to, people say we want to control global warming. God, that's too vague. What do you want to do? Do you want to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, or what do you want to do? And if the government said we want to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, then I would say, okay, fine. Let's do that in steps. And step one is convert the guy from coal to natural gas, and maybe from natural gas to electricity down the road, and then to nuclear. But they don't tell us the steps. They have an end goal in mind, and then they do silly things that make things worse. So yes, if the goal for the environment is to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, what the government just announced in Nova Scotia and the Maritimes won't work. It's going to make things worse.
Well, and I hate to reiterate myself here, like repeat over and over again, but if we're buying energy from coal out of the United States, all it's doing is flubbing the numbers and saying that Canada is not using this, but you're offsetting it somewhere else.
Totally.
You have a coal-fired plant instead of a coal-fired plant in Canada, or instead of natural gas elements in your own home. We could be sending pipelines down to Nova Scotia so that they could run on natural gas, and they'd be much cleaner than the oils that they're using now, and it would be more energy efficient and cheaper for everybody.
It's so, the corruption and not the corruption, but this is so bad. The other thing that I'm going to get frustrated, but I mean, and we propose steps, right? We propose steps. I mean, right now the heating oil in Newfoundland comes from offshore. It comes from Saudi Arabia. It comes from Venezuela. It comes from Qatar. It comes from wherever. And then again, like you said, the electricity isn't going to come from. They're going to still burn oil to make electricity. So lose some efficiency and then use the electricity in somebody's home to run a furnace that's inefficient. Oh, it's never ending with these liberals. It's never ending.
It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But anyway,
but on the plus side, I mean, it's sad. Again, it's sad. It's one of these things that are tipping the country to a tipping point. I mean, as soon as the liberals announced this, then yes, you saw division across the country. I mean, Scott Moe, who's the premier of Saskatchewan. So Saskatchewan won't benefit from this tax relief. And so he immediately made a video announcement. He told the prime minister, either you give all the provinces this equal relief. By the way, we'll come back to that, right? Equal treatment of all the provinces. Mm-hmm. He's like, either you lift this and you give all the provinces equal treatment, or I will order my Crown Corporation, Sask Power, that provides natural gas, to not collect the carbon tax. And then they had a vote on that this week. And amazingly, in Saskatchewan, all parties came together, including the NDP, and voted in favor of that motion.
Wow.
So now Trudeau's creating, again, he's creating enemies. He's creating this division. And so this is going to be a pissing match, right? I mean, I can see what's going to happen now, because Saskatchewan will say, oh, we're not collecting it through our Crown corporations. What do you think Ottawa's going to do next year? Well, we're not sending you transfer payments. And I mean, again, back to what we've talked in the past of statesmanship, Canada is a fragile confederation of 10 different regions that works better that was designed to have some common sense, some statesmen, some diplomats in Ottawa. Make sure that we have equal treatment. That's why we have equalization. We said, okay, that's the cost of doing business as a confederation. If Alberta's doing well, we have to share our wealth with the East, and everybody deserves the same level of treatment. But now Ottawa is like purposely, there's no other way to say it, purposely playing favorites.
Yeah.
Like
and it's obvious the reasons why, because, well, there's 26 different Liberal ridings in Nova Scotia. So they're definitely going for the vote.
There's 26 in Atlantic Canada. Don't quote us, folks, but there's about 26 in Atlantic Canada versus 34 in Alberta and Saskatchewan, kind of thing. So yeah, if he flipped all those seats, but he won't. I mean, luckily, this is too little, too late for him. Like
here's the thing that got me, and I said this in my video talking about it. It said, well, okay, so say you're in Atlantic Canada and you voted Liberal before. Well, the Liberals are going to give you a break for the next 3 years. And before the election, they're going to turn that break off. You can vote for the Conservatives and continue that break because they'll get rid of the carbon tax.
Or get that break tomorrow morning, right? And absolutely. And then this topic is so relevant this week. Let's stay on this topic if you don't mind.
Nope, don't mind.
We talked about, there was arguments that the carbon tax doesn't add to inflation, which is a ridiculous concept, right? Anybody with a modicum of common sense would know that if you add a tax on something, prices go up. Well, this week, following the inflation numbers from the Bank of Canada, the governor of the Bank of Canada was on the defensive again and was asked repeatedly, to clarify what is the impact of the carbon tax on inflation. And it was really relevant in light of this. And the Bank of Canada pretty much said that, in this video, he pretty much said it's 60 base. He said if we eliminate the carbon tax today, it's 60 basis point, which is, a basis point is how economists talk about numbers like interest rates and inflation. Mm-hmm. So the inflation rate's at 3.8. Tiff Mackin said without the carbon tax, inflation would be 3.2%. And the target range for the bank is to keep the inflation between 1% and 3%. So what Tiff is saying, and he said it very politely, like he's swimming upstream against brutal liberal policies. And he said in committee today, if we remove the carbon tax, inflation becomes back in almost in the target range, and then he could ease up on interest rates and provide other relief for Canadians. So
he also said one thing that I had to disagree with, and I felt it was politically motivated, was the fact that he said if it was dropped this year, say they dropped it now, it would last a year, and then there would be no other benefit from the carbon tax. Now, there would be a long-lasting benefit because it would remain gone, and it would... This is the thing. It's a compounding tax.
He's talking mathematics, right? You and I know. I mean, the inflation is measured on a year-over-year measure, so he would say that it wouldn't. Yeah, I know what he's saying, and I'm with you. I disagree. It's semantics at this point. So,
but I wanted to point out that this is something that he also said last year, and I have a clip of him.
Recovery and to return inflation to the 2% target. Interest rates are very low, and they're going to be there for a long time. We recognize that Canadian businesses are facing an unusual amount of uncertainty. And so we have been unusually clear about the future path for interest rates. If you've got a mortgage, or if you're considering to make a major purchase, or you're a business and you're considering making an investment, you can be confident that interest rates will be low for a long time.
That's my thought on the
That's
confidence,
criminal, man. That's almost one of the biggest. That's one of the biggest oops of all time, of recent time anyways. It's in line with, of course, the Titanic won't sink. It's the best, it's unsinkable. Yeah, okay.
Well,
interest rates won't go up.
It's one thing to say that interest rates, our plan is to keep them low, but it's another to say that they will be low. And hey, guess what? If you were going to spend a big amount of money, go ahead and do that. Take out a big loan. Take out a big mortgage. Why don't you do that?
And we have rules. That's why we have rules. That's why it's secret, and that's why he's only allowed to release the numbers once in a while. This is a forward-looking statement on his part. If I did that as a businessman, I said, hey, my production of oil next year is going to be 2 million barrels, I can make a bit of a forecast, but I have to be so careful, because if it could lead to insider trading, and I could be accused of all sorts of things. That was irresponsible of Tiff to make that statement. Hey, but they pay themselves bonuses no matter what. So
no matter what. No matter what. Well, and that kind of clues into our next little story here about the fact that we've gone into 2 consecutive months of decline in our GDP, so that we're officially in a recession now. We're actually officially past the textbook definition of what a recession is. We were at not 0.1, a negative 0.1% GDP growth, and then not 0.2 the second month. So it's accelerating by 50%, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I didn't pin it to my profile, but the MNP, Myers Norris, whatever, one of the big accounting firms, they did a big survey last week, a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, Canadians are in trouble. I mean, with the mortgage renewals and the debt on credit cards and things like that, they did a survey, and I can't, the number is like almost about a third of Canadians right now are always $200 short of disaster. Like their margin, Canadians' margin is $200. So if that means, in simple terms, that means if you're driving and suddenly you get a flat tire and the garage says it's going to be $200 to repair that flat tire,
you're broke.
You've used your whole margin of error for the whole month, and you have nothing left. And that's an unhealthy way to live. I mean, I can't imagine being worried about that, where you're driving and you get a flat and you just go, oh, great, we can't go play. Kids can't play hockey this week. That's the level that the economy's at. Yeah. And meanwhile, we're seeing again in committee after committee after committee, the waste of the Canadian government. You know, there was the Arrive Can committee is a joke today again. Actually, that was a funny one. That was another funny one. I can't remember the MP's name. His last name is Genius almost, or a weird play on genius. And he was interviewing the CEO of one of these ghost companies that gets these humongous government contracts. And he was doing it. It was like a scene out of The Office, you know, in The Office with the two consultants that are interviewing the employees. Yeah. And he's like, tell us what you do here. And that poor guy couldn't, well, we hire based on diversity. We hire, and the MP questioning him is like, yeah, but we gave you whatever, $80 million. Like, what do you do for $80 million? And the guy couldn't answer. It's a ghost corporation.
Wow.
It was.
What happens to that money? It goes in and it disappears, and then it's never to be found.
It disappears. Well, man, now what a week we had, right?
I know, right?
Let's talk about money disappearing. Remember how last week I was still naive, and your viewers point that out to me, and that's great. You know, yes, folks, Marty's a sort of an optimist at hand, tries to be an optimist, and then gets disappointed. I get it. So last week or a couple of weeks ago, the Canada Pension Plan is on the topic, and I'm still saying, yeah, you know, the government has to be arm's length. The money, the $500 billion, is sitting in a separate account. And the separate organizations managing our pension. Well, because Alberta wants to go its own and create the Alberta Pension Plan, this is all coming to light. Mm-hmm. So Danielle Smith this week wrote a letter to Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister, saying, okay, this is getting serious. So tell us, what's our share of the Canada Pension Plan? Well, that's putting a lot of pressure on it. But anyways, long story short, I'm actually starting to doubt that the money's there. Now I'm actually, you know, why is Trudeau so against Alberta going its own way? Is because if we really dive into the Canada Pension Plan, we might all wake up as Canadians and go, holy shit, man, there is no money. They're paying us out of yeah, I'm still an optimist. I'm looking at the Canada website, the pension plan website that shows their big investments and that there's $500 billion in there. But part of Marty says, shit, it's in the general coffers. And why wouldn't, you know, if a government dipping into its pension plan, that wouldn't surprise me. Corporations have done it forever and ever in the last 50 years. You know, General Motors goes bankrupt and gets in trouble. They get tempted to dip into their employees' pension plan. Why wouldn't our government be tempted to do that? And now this incompetence and this money mismanagement. And what's the term you always like to use? You call it
regime uncertainty. It's a term coined by the Mises Institute, I believe it was.
Yeah. And well, you have another term for mismanagement. What do you call it? You call it
I can't think of the term.
Anyways, you'll say it later somehow or other. It'll come. But yeah. I don't trust the government. I don't trust the government. I don't.
So I have the letter
you
here.
Trust the government.
So this was actually a letter from Nate Horner. He's the Minister of Finances in Alberta, and he sent the letter to Freeland's office, and essentially saying, "Show us the money. Show us what you've got, because we want to take this over. We're going to have to appropriate these funds so that we can take care of them." And the rest of Canada is paying very close attention to this, because the rest of Canada is going, if they can't pay Alberta, how are they going to pay the rest of us? Right? This is crazy. And I tweeted out saying Alberta's Minister of Finance, Nate Horner, challenges Chrystia Freeland to show, what has the federal government done with our pension money? At 5% interest rate, it should be earning us more. And this is where I think I wanted to bring this into this conversation today, because if they borrowed against it, say they put a bunch of IOUs in there instead of keeping that money in there that would be accruing 5% interest at the moment. Now it's a debt accruing 5% debt interest rates.
Which is why the Bank of Canada is getting in trouble, because the Bank of Canada is issuing bonds that are now coming due, and they don't have money to pay the bonds. So now they're having to borrow money at a higher interest rate to pay the bonds. Yeah, it's if you mismanage, well, that's what's the concept here? I mean, we're not going to get into, now we're getting into really fancy economics, but when you're borrowing other people's money or leveraging, that's kind of the term. When you're leveraging, if things go south, they go south on you extremely fast.
Yes.
So I think we're seeing that now, that the bank the economy is in terrible shape. And back to so this is all, again, sorry listeners, but there's no good news on the horizon. There's no good news on the horizon for the next year and a bit, and it's getting worse and worse. I think, yes, the Bank of Canada is probably going to officially declare that there's a recession. They haven't done it yet. The government hasn't done it yet, but other banks, other groups have said it. Canada is in a recession by definition, like you pointed out. When you go 2 quarters in a row of negative GDP or decreasing GDP, you're in a recession. And well. Oh God. Now I'm thinking GDP, right? Another bullshit number. I mean, it's so easy to fake the GDP, but it's so bad right now that they can't even fake the GDP, right. And the GDP is going down.
Yeah.
So,
and I talk about this quite a bit, the fact that the GDP includes government spending. So anytime the government spends, so it would be like building a new swimming pool in your backyard and adding that to your income.
Or your assets or your balance sheet, and it's a worthless. Well, and you saw what they added to the balance sheet, or to the GDP balance sheet today, not this week, today. Who's the immigration minister? Anyways, he just announced the immigration targets for next year, because that's another way they cheat the GDP. They just, GDP is basically calculated at the individual level, the amount of growth at the individual level, and then they multiply by the individual, and then they get the gross domestic production. So a fast way to increase our GDP, our gross GDP, is through immigration. So today they announced that next year's target for immigration, I think, is 485,000 in 2024. In 2025, it's 500,000 and 500,000 a year after that, plus 800,000 student visas and 150,000 refugee claims. So we're talking adding 600,000 people a year to the economy. So on one side they go, oh, that's great for the GDP. No. On the other side, where do we house those people? We're already in a housing crisis. The most housing units that we've ever created in a single year in this country is somewhere around 250,000 housing units. And that was back in the 90s, when there was almost no regulations. Trying to build 600,000 housing units in Canada these days with the regulations we have, not going to happen. It's too complicated. And so,
not to mention the downturned economy, with the prices falling on houses and a downturned economy, people are not going to build new houses. I mean, you'll have the demand for it, but you're not going to have you're not going to have, you have the demand for the houses, but you don't have the demand for the building of the houses. The people don't want to spend the money on it. It's not going to happen. So you're going to have until we see deflation come to its bottom in the housing market, until we see the housing market hit its rock bottom, that's when we'll see growth happen again. Hey,
want to do? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, until they allow for that to happen and keep doing what the Bank of Canada has been doing or started doing, raise the interest rates. The interest rates have to go way up. There's been a malinvestment in the market economy, which
malinvestment. I knew you'd use it. I knew you'd use that term. You just use it. Malinvestment.
It's malinvestment. Yeah. Okay. So malinvestment, for people who don't know the term, it's when there's market signals in the economy that convince people to go into things that aren't really a great idea, actually. If it wasn't for a distortion,
Bitcoin is usually an exact,
if there wasn't a distortion in the market, people wouldn't have gone into it.
Can we twist this one really weird? Check this out. Okay, so home ownership means buying property, which is a property right. Well, guess what the government did in this country this week? They made property rights risky, because the Supreme Court upheld Trudeau's
no, not the Supreme Court. Sorry, that was
not the Supreme.
That was a federal judge, so they could go to the Supreme Court next. So.
It could go, and it still has an appeal court, but a major court in this country upheld an order in council that Trudeau passed 3 years ago, which we commonly call the gun grab. He declared certain firearms illegal to the point of confiscating them. And when the court upheld that today, it was a precedent that reaffirmed the fact that Canadians don't have property rights like some other countries do. And so again, we have a housing crisis, and other foreign banks are going to say, well, why would we lend you guys money? First of all, you can freeze our bank accounts if you feel like it. You don't have property rights, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, to your viewers, can everybody start seeing what's happening? Like this liberal government is making a complete mockery of this country, a country that our founders built over the course of 156 years, further than that, I get it. You know, there's people here before 1867, but in just a mere 8 years, the amount of damage these guys have done is incredible.
Well, and
incredible.
This gets into my other term, the regime uncertainty, that I like to talk about, and what that is basically they stomped on property rights, because you can take what she had to say. The judge in this case, she said that in a paraphrase that. Basically, she's not going to consider the rights of gun owners in this piece of legislation or this new regulation. It's not going to be considered what the rights are of these right. gun owners. And I mean, just replace gun owners with whatever other kind of property, car owners, homeowners,
jet ski owners,
oil furnace owners, like all this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like these are things that could be coming up in the near future that the government is trying to ban. They're trying to ban gasoline cars. They're trying to ban all of these items. Most people will try to grandfather theirs in so that they can continue to use them. But this is a tactic and a measure that could be used against people. And it's an order in council. This is the worst part about it. This isn't about the legislative branch got together. They passed a bill through the representatives of the public in the House of Commons, and then it went to the Senate and it was discussed and argued, and then it finally went through. No. This is one man in an office saying this piece of property is no longer legal in this country, and there's nothing you can do about it.
It's even worse than that, Clyde. It's one man passing a rule who then passes the buck to somebody else. So Trudeau didn't even decide which weapons or which firearms are going to be banned. That's his legislative powers. He passed on his powers to an executive branch called the RCMP, and it's the RCMP that now decides. Well, that's insane, because I mean, at least if he had passed that power to an independent body of some group that said, okay, we'll decide which firearms are banned and which are not. But no, he actually passed that power through an order in council to the RCMP. The RCMP is here to enforce the laws, but now simultaneously the RCMP gets to decide which firearms should be banned and which shouldn't be. Like that's
and arbitrarily on top of that.
Arbitrarily.
So it's arbitrarily, and then it's also they don't have to make any announcements to the people who they even have a list of the people who own these things, and they don't have to make announcements. And not only that, if you're holding a restricted firearms license, the RCMP can go into your house, giving you only 24 hours notice. And if you
agree to it when you got the permit, absolutely.
Yeah, and if you have these firearms registered to you, they could just surprise in 24 hours. We're coming into your house. Look for that, and then you could be looking at a felony for owning a piece of property that was completely legal and you bought legally with permits and everything. Only could have been months before.
I don't want to get deep in this topic, but owning firearms in this country, I own firearms. And owning firearms in this country is a very complicated process. We jump through a lot of legal loops. And I actually have friends who've asked me about, the steps going through. And I tell people, like, unless you really absolutely want to own firearms and you want to use them for hunting and stuff like that, don't just do it as a hobby, because you can get yourself in trouble really, really, really fast. Like as an example, if I move, if I sell my house here and I move somewhere else, I got to remind myself that 6 months before my move, I have to notify the RCMP and the firearms officer, and then I have to transfer my firearms, change my address, and we can get ourselves in legal trouble in a heartbeat because of the complexity of firearm laws. But anyways, I just want to get back to what you brought up a great point. People say, oh, I don't like firearms, so I don't give a shit. This rule doesn't apply to me. But you brought up a great point. It does apply to you. Yeah. You're right. Like if the government next year says, oh yeah, we're banning internal combustion engine cars in 2035, and we won't grandfather them. With this precedent, the government would be allowed to come and say justifiably or unjustifiably, we're confiscating your gas-powered car. And people go, they'd never do that. It's like, oh my God, like wake up.
Like,
folks,
listen to all the things that they would never do, that we all said that they would
Yeah.
never do. And it's just adding up every single day. It's getting worse and worse and worse.
The government could say, you don't need a jet ski. You don't need an ATV. You don't need a jet ski would be a good example. You don't need a powerboat. Why do you need to go water skiing? That's no more gas powered power boats. And yeah.
And then on top of this, what really this is a big signal to investors. This is a huge signal to investors out there of regime uncertainty. We cannot trust what the Canadian government is going to do moving forward, because if I invest into this country, any bit of my capital could be confiscated for whatever reason, arbitrarily, because of the regime at the moment. These kind of laws, they can't stick around, and you can't just get rid of the elected officials that are in place that are using them, because another government could come in and use them in another way. So you have to be very careful about this kind of legislation.
No, it's a risk that the average Joe doesn't understand. Like if you're a bank wanting to invest $1 billion in a huge housing complex in this country, the regime uncertainty means that the government can get changed, and people don't want that. Like, because the projects last longer than the 4 years of a government mandate, and so now banks are afraid to invest. Never mind that, they're also afraid to invest in the fact that the money invested could sit there for years because it takes so long to get something approved. So if a development is a great idea, somebody might say, oh yeah, I'd love to invest in a hospital, but if it takes 10 years to build a hospital in this country, the investors are going to go, forget it. It's too risky. It takes too long. My money's sitting there, not earning me anything. Plus, at any time, there could be I lived it. Hey, Clyde, I lived it. I mean, I had drilling permits in the province of Quebec. And it took us, we had 3 government changes in the 6 years that I was working in there, and every government messed us up so bad. In the end, we're like, bye-bye, we're out of here.
Yeah, the only good contracts these days, it seems to be if you're a well-connected liberal and you're doing stuff through the government in green projects, apparently. And that gets us into what was discovered just today, because this is really egregious. This is insider recording.
Can you play the clip? I haven't heard it. I've heard about it, but I haven't heard the clip.
Oh, you haven't heard the clip, the actual clip?
No, I haven't heard the clip. Like, how long's the clip? Hang on, cue it up for the viewers. Like, what's the? I mean, I heard briefly. It's another scandal, right? It's another scandal. Add it on your bingo card, like scandal number 12.
Well, I'm gonna play the clip here, but just before we do, this is a short clip of Pierre Poilievre in a meeting. Talking about what this whole clip is about. So we'll get into that first, and then I'll play the clip.
Secret recordings from a top bureaucrat in the Liberal government admit that a green fund was giving out, quote, free money. Get this. I'm going to quote from the recording. It was free money, he said, before making an analogy with the controversy that affected Jean Chrétien's Liberal government in the 2000s. That is almost sponsorship scandal level giveaway. Wow. So when they said green fund, what they meant is putting green in the pockets of well-connected liberals. $1 billion fund.
Yeah, $1 billion fund. So this is this is the clip here. This is like a supercut of the clips that were coming out of it. And of course it is not playing for me. Here we go.
Allegation. So the fact.
Yeah, here we go.
The very preliminary findings of the fact-finding exercise is that there is smoke around the vast majority of the allegations. We said we would believe you. Now there's enough evidence to say that we really do believe you, and that means that that the government is going to have to take action. There's a lot of sloppiness and laziness. There is some outright incompetence. The situation is just kind of untenable at this point. I think the the minister is going to flip out when he hears the stuff, and he's going to want an extreme reaction, like shut it all down. No, it's unlikely.
He didn't show up to Parliament over this.
Board or the entire board and executive are going to be able to continue to serve. Like, they've kind of lost the confidence. So really the discussion will be the mechanisms for getting them out. First of all, we need to have control of the board, and in order to actually have a plurality of votes if we want to go after the executive. So that's the stuff where kind of the machinations are figuring out right now. But the report implicates the board in terrible ways, by not following process, by not following the COI regime, by not being prudent fiduciaries. It's just a board failure altogether.
So it's looking like about $40 million is out to just walked out the door. Now I wanted to show you this clip because this is a funny one. Stephanie Kuzi in the House of Commons asking them. Well, just listen.
How much worse can this boondoggle get? Simple question: which Liberal insiders got rich?
Who got rich? Mr. Speaker, as colleagues know very well.
How much worse can this boondoggle get? Simple question.
Oh, I had to throw that one in there.
Well, the other clip I liked in the House of Commons today or this week was Trudeau still standing up, going like, "When I win we're going to win the next election," and then I'm trying to put my hands, and Poilievre is sitting there across from him, like, bring it on, buddy.
Bring it on.
And we might have a chance. I mean, we won't have a chance, but there is a vote on, good for the Conservatives to do this. There is a vote on Monday. So the Conservatives raised a motion again around the carbon tax. They're going to ask the Liberal Party, will you lift the carbon tax across the country on home fuels like you did for Atlantic Canada? I doubt it will be a confidence motion. It's not important enough to be a confidence motion, but it's going to put pressure on a lot of pressure on NDP and Liberal MPs from rural ridings and places, because they're going to have to go and turn back and face their constituents and say, hey, I mean, you saw the other MP, right? There was an MP from Nova Scotia, I think, who basically said, if you want the same thing, vote Liberal. She basically admitted that, oh yeah, that's what no.
Well, what about all those people in Northern Ontario and parts of other parts of the country?
Northern BC.
They're not getting any of this deal. They're not getting any of these carve outs.
And you guys, like, BC has a lot of rural NDP ridings, like Northern BC, Prince George, and places like that. So if the MP for Prince George votes against this motion next week on Monday, that poor guy is going to have to face his constituents at one point. Yeah. And I think, and by the way, to your viewers, November, which we're into, November is unofficially Write Your MP a Letter month. So take a page out of that, and it doesn't take long to write to your MP. You can do it by emails, you can do it by mail, or call them. I mean, I think we should all do that. Just call your MP and say, hey, this is bullshit. That's all you need to do. Just call your MP. You're not going to talk to him. You're going to talk to his secretary, but call your MP and say what's going on. Even if your MP is Conservative, call your MP and say what's going on in Atlantic Canada is bullshit, or what Trudeau's doing is bullshit. That's all. Just call your MP.
Yeah, that's a call to action if I ever heard one. Get on the horn and get out there.
Eva Chipyuk's the one who's been pushing that. I think you've had Eva. She says hi, by the way. She was I was texting with her earlier today.
I gotta have Eva on again.
Yeah, she has Max Bernier has agreed to go on her show.
Oh, great.
And she's going to talk to Max, and I think she wanted me to be on the show. I'm like, no. I am not going on the show with Max. I mean, no, I'm not going on the show with Max.
Yeah, I've had Max on. I've had Max
maybe
on twice.
I know he's a nice guy. He's not. It wouldn't be a toxic meeting, but I find him too I don't like his canned answers. I think he's too rehearsed, and I don't
that's the image that I got. But you get that out of any politician, really. That's just that's trying to run at the national.
You don't get that out of Danielle Smith. Have you had Danielle Smith on your show yet?
I haven't.
I wonder
If anybody has a contact for her, I'd love to.
I have all her contact information. I can put you in touch with Danielle. Let's because if you had a chat like this with Danielle, it would be like this. Like you can catch her off guard on anything, and she'll think about it and she has an opinion. And sometimes it's platitudes. I mean, yes, she's a politician, but more often than not, well, she walked into the wolf's den late last week when she went and met with the Pembina Institute's annual conference on green energy or whatever, and somebody stepped up and asked a question, and she just went on, and she was brilliant. Like and it was around some of the stuff we talked about today. Can the energy grid in Alberta be transformed to net zero by 2035? She said no, and she said she said it would take 4 power plants or energy dams the size of Site C built in the next 12 years. And she said, Site C was started in 1980 and it's still not under construction. So super valid. And she said, who can think of any major project built in under 12 years? Could we do it? And there's some people sort of like sheepishly saying, oh yeah, we could do it. It's like, no, we can't. Not in the current state of the country. You could never,
no way. I liked her answer. She was on, I think, CTV News the other day. They asked her if she would put pressure on the energy companies in Alberta to do the same thing as Scott Moe, and she said, well, she can't do that. It's not.
We're a free market.
Yeah, it's a free market. It's not. It's up to them for them to do what they're going to do. It does look like it would be illegal for them to do that, so there'd be repercussions on them. It's a unique position that Scott Moe has, with it being a Crown Corp
but it's illegal, and what Scott Moe's doing is, he said illegal, in his video, it's illegal, but and he's going to pay for it. Like I said, the Liberals will withhold their transfer payments next year, but tit for tat. I mean, Stephen Guilbeault, when the court overturned C-69 and saying it was unconstitutional, he basically said, I don't give a shit what the court says. I'm going to do it anyway. So it goes both ways. I mean, in fact, I'd argue that it's the Liberals who started this whole crap of acting in illegal ways. They're the ones who did the Emergency Measures Act. They're the ones who keep getting away by trampling our rights and freedoms and using the Constitution as toilet paper. And now it's cascading. It's what a terrible state we're in. I mean, we got premiers that are openly promoting breaking the law. I mean, it's a bad move now that I think about it, because I'm going to go speed down the road, and when I get pulled up by a cop, I'm going to go, well, the premier's breaking the law, the prime minister's breaking the law, all the backbenchers are filling their pockets. Why the hell am I the guy who's getting in trouble? Like, oh, let me speed.
right. But I would liken it to like a Canadian Boston Tea Party moment, to say, well, if you can't, the whole concept of the Boston Tea Party is they had to give the tea away. It was the taxes that they were having to pay as a colony. And they said, oh, well, we're not going to get to keep it, so whatever, let's just throw it in the harbor. And they just destroyed it and said, no, you can't have it either. And it affected a lot of change. It affected a bloody war, but it did absolutely affect a tremendous amount of change from some of the greatest people in our history. Anyway, Marty, where can people find you?
Marty Up North on this platform on YouTube, and Marty Up North on Twitter. Yeah, great chat, Clyde. Man, this one was a good one. This was a good chat. And I wanted to keep it short just so your viewers know my in-laws are visiting right now. There's a little bit of noise in the background, and I want to go rejoin them because they're on their way through. They're heading to Costa Rica. They're lucky they get to escape this madness. I'm not there yet. And so I asked you beforehand, let's try and keep it to half an hour. We can't do it. There's too much going on in this country. It's fascinating, and it's fun to talk about, right? I think I hope your viewers enjoy this one, because I super enjoyed this one. This was a good chat, man. Have a good night, Clyde.
All right, Marty. Cheers.
Cheers.